Good afternoon. I'm Paul Wilkins. I'm with Approved Inheritance Cash. We're a finance company that specializes in probate financing during the probate process. But a lot of people think, oh, what's probate? It's really arcane, but do people die? Of course they do. Unfortunately, 2.5 million people die every year in this country. Probably more now that, COVID's a factor. So we're going to have lots of probates every year. We have 11,000, 12,000 cases alone in LA County, 40 to 50,000 statewide every year. Those are just the cases that are filed, A lot of people don't know that you have to commence with probate to transfer the title to the property. So I see many, many cases where grandma died 20 years ago, 10 years ago, mom died 5 years ago, and since the property's paid off or there's a very low loan on the property, these people, they either make the payments or they just pay the taxes sometimes and live in the property until somebody compels them to move. So anyway, it's a good area to understand and to learn. I'm going to be open to a lot of questions today, so please raise them as they come up. If I get short on time, I will cut it off, but I'll do the best I can with as many questions as I can. Okay? And as a little plug, I wrote a book a couple of years ago. I've been doing this 26 years, so it's fed me for a while, made some house payments and whatnot. I wrote a book called Probate for Real Estate Investors, aimed at people just like you. Tell you all about the probate process, what's involved, the time frames, the players, the participants, so you can do a better job understanding this relatively narrow but very important area of finance and investing. Okay? So, having said that, and I just killed the mouse here. There we go. Why do we need probate? Basically, to obtain the court's authorization to transfer the assets. The biggest misunderstanding that people have is that, oh, mom has a will, we don't need to worry about probate. Well, think about it for a minute. Those of you who have dabbled in real estate investing, just because you give the will to the title company, is the title company going to say, oh yeah, we'll accept it? Will the bank accept payments from you because you have a will? Not necessarily. I have a joke, I never met a check I didn't like. Okay? Well, most banks do too, but once they start seeing money come from another source, they can and will often call the loan. So you have to think about that, all right? How do you get around probate? Okay, how do you get around having to go in front of a judge and having this done?
Trust.
A trust, exactly. Properly established trust will usually achieve this transfer. When wouldn't a trust work? If somebody contests, if mom didn't like Danny because he was a bad boy and he always, made fun of her and never, washed the dishes after dinner, he might get an attorney and file an objection, especially if the house is worth $2 million and he thinks his dirty, rotten brother, who was the nicest guy on earth, shouldn't get it, right? So that's when it happens. But in most cases, if you establish a good trust, it's going to work. Even if someone contests, you go in front of a judge, the judge is going to say it, unless there's contradictory evidence to go against what the trust says, the judge is, in 98% of the cases going to uphold the validity of the trust, and you will be able to proceed. Okay? Going back to a will must be accepted by the court to be valid. And you know how many cases people sign a will and they either A, forget to sign it, B, forget to have it notarized, C, prepare it on some, in the old days, and this stuff, you can go to LegalZoom now, but like 20, 30 years ago, before LegalZoom and that kind of stuff, the internet, people used to go to stationery stores and they would buy these blank forms that you would take to these ancient things called typewriters. I'm ancient, so I grew up in school using typewriters, but they would prepare, they have these blank forms and then you just type in the information. I want Sonny Boy to get this, I don't want my evil daughter to have anything, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's how they would do things in the old days. I know you young people don't understand those, but it's okay. Just kind of giving you some ancient history. This is working what this does. Okay. There we go. Okay, so in California we have a 4-page standard petition to file a probate. We use it throughout the state. Just about any court in the state will use this. So if you needed to start a probate matter, you would fill out the petition, send it to the court. Within usually 30 to 45 days, you have the initial hearing to validate the appointment of the administrator to the estate. Okay, the person who would be in charge. If there's a will, that person would be an executor. Don't get lost in the minutia. Okay, the point is there's somebody in charge of the estate. The court will appoint that person to take over. Okay. What if there is no will? We call that intestate legally. Okay, no will. The law specifies very clearly who takes. I'll pick on guys for a second. Let's say the guy dies and he's married. Well, according to the law, according to the law, the spouse will get 1/2 of the estate if there's one child, or 1/3 of the estate if there's 2 or more children. Okay, so the spouse essentially gets 1/3, and the children, even if there's 20 children, they're going to split 2/3 of the estate. Okay, that's the law. If there's no, I don't have any kids. I'm not married. If I were to die, my father, who's still alive, would be my heir because he's dead. Okay? If he's not around, my brother would be my heir because under intestacy, he's the next related relative I have. Okay? The court will appoint the individual with the highest priority. If a spouse applies for administratorship, he or she will get appointed in 99% of the cases. If a child applies for administratorship, and let's say, a grandchild applies, unless there's some compelling reason otherwise, the judge will appoint the child rather than a grandchild to be the administrator of the estate. Okay? How long does probate take? That is a problem because especially the courts were slow to begin with, but with COVID, it's only gotten worse. Okay, when we put this together about 4 years ago, we said typically it'll take 6 to 18 months, sometimes more. I've seen a typical case will take close to 2 years now, more like the 18 months. And some I've seen are a lot older. There was one case that we closed out in August, I think. It had been open 25 years. So that's a long time for somebody to wait for their money, right? I might not be around in 25 years, but, you know, that's just something there. All right, so it can take a long time, okay? Filing the petition, who does it? When my grandparents died many years ago, they had a will that left me, the eldest grandchild, as the executor. Okay, so I took it upon myself correctly to file, even though my mom and my aunts were alive. I took care of business because that's what Grandma and Grandpa wanted me to do. So I, with my attorney, filed the paperwork with the court and got the process going. Once the administrator executor is appointed, in California we have a 4-month creditor claim period. If there's any mortgages, car loans, credit card bills, Medi-Cal, you know, medical bills, Medicare, any of those things, they have 4 months in which to submit the bill to the estate. The estate essentially, think of it this way, if it's a little nebulous for you, it's kind of like a corporation. Once the court appoints the administrator is like the president of the corporation, kind of, sort of. And what they're going to do is handle the affairs of the deceased person up until the time it's resolved. Okay? So that's part of the process is the creditor claim period, and you're ascertaining the debts outstanding. During this process, you're also going to compile an inventory. You're going to put what assets the individual had, be it a house, be it a baseball card collection, coin collection, rental property, 401s, you know, retirement plans, whatever. All that stuff will get inventoried, and you'll submit the paperwork to the court. Who does that? The court, the day of the hearing, they appoint a probate referee, which is a court functionary. They get very little money, don't worry about that. But they will essentially ascertain the value of all assets that are not cash. If you have a bank account, you know, $10,000 and you present the bank account, well, that's easy enough. There's $10,000 there. Okay, but a house, a boat, you know, cars, somebody, the probate referee has to establish the value there. Okay. Once the values are established, you can liquidate the assets. The idea is to come up with a cash value at the end of everything so that the court can dictate who gets paid and who gets what. And then finally, the final petition, once everything is liquidated, once all the bills are paid, you submit the final paperwork to the court, the judge will rule on it, and at that time you can distribute the funds to the rightful heirs, you can pay the creditors, and so forth. Any questions thus far? Or is it all crystal clear?
That
Yes,
one
sir.
that took 25 years, was your property held up during that 25
You
years?
bet,
Yeah.
of course.
Okay.
And I had put some money out on that property, so I had to wait a long time to get repaid, but I did get repaid.
And the value went up.
Okay, good point, and I want to bring up that point right now. One of the reasons why you can get a good deal in probate situations is that the value for probate is as of the date of death. Okay, so up until about 6 months ago, the market had been going up steadily for like 10 years. And now it's kind of gone sideways or maybe down just a tad, okay? But let's say somebody died 3 or 4 years ago, and like I said, it happens a lot more often than you would tend to think, okay? The value will be as of the date of death 3 or 4 years ago. So let's just use some round numbers. If the property is worth $500,000 now, but 2 or 3 years ago when the person died it was worth $350,000, the court's going to say it's worth $350,000. Okay, and the estate can liquidate this without further ado if it gets at least 90% of the value as of the date of death. So can you see how the math is going to be in your favor if you're watching these things? Yeah, you can get some good deals out there. And like Linda said, you know, she got 3 probate deals herself, and you can make some good money in that. As part of the book, not to try to sell too much here, but I used 3 different cases: a wholesale situation, a retail, and a hold, a hold situation where the properties were acquired, and people that I know, students, cousins, made money doing these things because they were aware of the rules and were able to take advantage of the law. Okay?
And how do we get your book?
Oh, I have some right here.
Okay,
Is that a good deal?
it's a good deal.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears now, and please, if you have questions, ask. Company I work with, I'm one of the partners actually. We're in Pasadena, so we're nice and local. If you're an investor and you get us a good deal out there, it's probate. Okay, what's going to happen? These are going to be typical situations that you might see. These are typical situations that I see day in and day out. Somebody's behind on the mortgage. Somebody's behind on the taxes. I've saved probably a good 24 properties over the years from tax sale because we were able to give money, at the 11th hour and avoid the property going to tax sale. Okay? People, investors, anybody paid cash for keys? Up here you wouldn't because people are well-heeled, but like in less affluent areas, you're going to have some deadbeat. Did I say that? Excuse me. You're going to have a deadbeat in the property, and they don't have any money to move. And, mom or dad's been taking care of them for 50, 60 years of their life. These people have done nothing with their lives. So the investor buying the property is going to need to grease them a little bit to get them out of the property. Cash for keys. Okay? So if you have a situation like that, come to us. We'll give you the cash for keys instead of you reaching into your pocket and paying that person to move. If they're an heir, we'll give them an advance on their inheritance and get them out of the property for you. Okay? All right. You can't go to a bank, you can't go to a trust company during probate. They don't understand it's beyond the scope of. You have specialty lenders. You just heard one right now, and Barry, he's a specialty lender. They understand these kind of things, but you go to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and they're going to look at you, huh? What do you want? They don't understand probate. They don't understand how to advance money during the process. So that's why you need somebody like us. Okay? We rely primarily on real estate assets, but it doesn't always have to be. Let's say there was one gentleman, I think he's not here right now, who was telling me earlier about a friend of his inheriting some money, a small amount. I have a deal I'm working right now where dad left like $250,000 life insurance policy. And the stepmother, of course, got the property, but the son, who's unemployed, living out of his truck, is, banking on getting some money from me so he can get on his feet again and get going. Yeah, well, if the life insurance information is in my inbox Monday morning, I'll be happy to put it together for him. Okay, so we don't necessarily need a house. 95% of what I do is based on real estate, but I can work on other assets. Financing is usually settled when the assets are sold and when the estates are closed. Sometimes, I can work with attorneys and we'll record a deed of trust on a property and get paid when it closes escrow. Why? It saves the client money, less interest. Okay, if that doesn't work, we'll get paid at the end of probate, which is a typical situation at the time when monies are distributed. Again, people coming to us, the principal use of monies would be to reinstate delinquent mortgages or taxes, cash for keys, as I mentioned, property repairs. I have, a fair amount of requests where, let's say you find a good deal. You buy that property we were talking about for, say, $300, and you could sell it for $5. If you can get one of the heirs or the administrator of the estate to step up and take an advance from us, we'll provide you the money during probate so you can sell it during probate. Why would the heirs want it sold during probate? One of the tax keys is that you don't get taxed on it. The estate tax, California doesn't have an estate tax. Federal, the estate has to be in excess of like $11 million now for you to be taxed federally. So if you conduct business during that period, it's tax-free money. If you say, no, I'm going to do it after probate's over, guess what? You bought yourself a tax bill. Not too smart. And, when I have a few people that say that, I politely remind them of that, and then usually their attorney convinces them that Paul was right, and they go forward. Okay, a lot of people, they need money for, bills or, food, utilities. I mean, I've had people living in houses that they don't have any utilities on. They can't afford the water bill, they can't afford the electric bills, and this is not Ukraine, this is the United States, people. So, it's sad, but it's true. There's a lot of people out there that are hurting, and we can help. Opportunities for you. I think the biggest thing as an investor is that you can obtain some good deals during the probate process by knowing the rules. I think the most important one, like you mentioned earlier, is the one about buying at using the date of death value, which is what the courts use. Okay, we don't have to rely on what today's value was. If somebody died 2, 3, 5 years ago, the court's going to value it lower. If you're working with us, I'm going to help you understand the process and maximize your return. I will, like I said, I will tell you, you've got tax issues here. I'm not an attorney, I'm not a CPA, but I've been doing it 26 years. I think I know a few things by now. Hopefully. Okay. Right, for some reason it wasn't working, but maybe it's just my fingers, but that works. Okay, this is supposed to, no, that's 4. Basically, you can wholesale properties, you can't read it there, but it says that. You can retail properties, buy, fix, and flips, and hold. And like I said, in the book I mentioned I have 3 chapters on each one of those sections. Wholesaling, retailing, and holds. Okay? Good way to add to your knowledge and add to your bank account. Okay. It was a brief presentation, but I'm open and happy to answer more questions, so please ask. Yes, sir.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Of course.
My dad passed away. We had a trust, and as we were going through the process, he had $30,000 in the bank, cash, and he had a credit card for $30,000. And cash always sounds like it's king, so I wanted to hang on to it. And there was a lot of things we had to do to fix the place up and take care of him during that period of time, so I started racking up his credit card. Once he passed away, Bank of America said, "You owe $30,000, we want to get paid." Well, I started calling around the different departments of the Bank of America, and finally I got to the right person that has to deal with death and all that, and they said, "No, that was his debt before he died. You owe us nothing."
Oh, no.
Just a little secret, if you're going through that process, hang on to the cash, spend the credit cards.
And the reason you were able to do that is that there was a trust set up.
Right.
Okay, if you have to file a probate, like I said, going back about 7 slides, you have the creditor claim period. So you have to, by law, notify everybody who might potentially be owed money that
Right.
your dad is deceased, but you don't have that obligation with the trust.
Right.
See, I'm one of those kind of businesses that if everybody did the proper thing, like set up trust, I'd be out of business. That's okay. I still get plenty of business, so not to worry.
So you mean to tell me if there's a trust in place, and let's say I have a debt that I need to pay, but I have a trust that will leave everything to my daughter, and I know about this debt, and if I die, the debt will just go away if everything is in a trust?
Well, if I can use Dan's
Okay.
analogy for your potential situation, your hypothetical, you wouldn't have the your daughter wouldn't have the legal responsibility to notify the bank that I'm the beneficiary of the trust and I need to pay you. You know, I think the bank would just have to kind of pound sand and, as they say, and deal with it, you know? So I think that's the, I'm not an attorney, I can't provide legal advice, but that's what I think. Yes, ma'am.
But would that ruin that daughter's credit if she didn't pay it?
If she's not on, if the daughter's not on the credit card, it's not her credit.
So she's
Right.
okay from there on? I mean, she's okay, she doesn't have a bad...
Yeah, it shouldn't show as a delinquency because she's not the
I'm done.
responsible party.
I'm in heaven.
Then you'd be a real hippie, yeah.
And my father was not worried about his credit score after he was dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the old days, this goes way back, like about the late 90s. Somebody would pass away, and the kids would say, "Oh, geez, I don't know how much they owed on the mortgage." So this is illegal, but back then we used to kind of slide under the radar. We would run a credit report for the deceased person and say, "Oh, they owe like $128,622, so we could tie it down." And when the boss heard about it, he goes, "Don't do that." Oh, okay. You know, it was a good trick for us to figure out that, because like, who's going to complain? The person going to come back to life and say, "Gee, some son of a gun, ran my credit."
Yeah.
Right?
And can't you now just do a property profile from, say, First American Trust or get that information, right?
You can find out how much is owed, but you don't know the specific dollar amount necessarily.
Okay.
And again, when you're dealing with these kind of situations, if you go to the bank and you say, "Hey, I want to, take care of business," they're going to want either letters of administration, which is what happens once the court appoints an administrator and executor to take charge of the estate, or in your case, you show them trust papers that say, "I am the successor trustee and I am authorized to conduct business going forward." So once you get that information to the banks or credit companies, you'll be okay. But up until that time, they're not going to talk to you, or they shouldn't, unless they're asleep at the wheel. Any other questions or concerns?
I was gonna say, how are you sourcing these properties? Is it a pretty typical, like, pulling list, or how do you know when a property becomes?
Good. I talk about that also in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I see, I haven't been to a courthouse for a few years to get information, but in the day, and I hear about it because we have a network of people that go out to the courthouses to obtain this information. There's people out there constantly looking. The probate records are public. You can get online in most counties and get this information. Okay, and it'll tell you, like when I filed for my grandparents, for example, it says, okay,